What's the word with y'all boys, man? Today we reacting to 5 times wannabe gangsters mess with the wrong cartels. Shit, let's get to it.
October 10th, 2010, Martin Cota Monroy made the grave mistake of stealing from an unforgiving Mexican cartel. Well, that pissed off the cartel, and what they did to him changed the course of his life forever. These are the times wannabe gangsters messed with the wrong cartels. In 1978, Palma got busted for drug trafficking in Arizona and ended up having to serve 8 years in a U.S. prison. But the real nightmare started after his release. He came home to a devastating truth. His wife, Guadalupe Lea Serrano, had run off with a man named Rafael Clavel Moreno, taking their 2 children with her.
Crazy.
What Clavel didn't realize, though, was that
This shit happened a lot too. That shit's crazy, gang.
that his betrayal wasn't just about stealing another man's family. His greed and cruelty had set him on this path with only one possible ending: his own brutal demise. Rafael Clavel Moreno's story is brutal and wild, and it definitely clears up some myths around his betrayal and downfall. Instead of being some cartel sicario or loyal enforcer, Clavel was a greedy lowlife who got too close to power and money, thinking he could pull off a heist at the expense of a major cartel figure. He played his cards wrong, seduced the wrong woman, stole from the wrong man, and he thought he could disappear after committing one of the most vicious betrayals in cartel history?
Hell no.
Yeah, Palma wasn't a random gangster. He was a high-ranking Sinaloa member with a network that could hunt anyone down. Moreno thought he was playing the long game here, but in reality, he was just another opportunist who bit off more than he could chew. A Venezuelan trafficker with a knack for manipulation, he wasn't a big-time cartel boss or a feared enforcer. He was a smooth-talking snake who got in over his head. His biggest claim to fame? Pulling off one of the most brutal betrayals in cartel history. In the late 1980s, Clavel managed to get close to Hector El Guero Palma, a high-ranking member of the Sinaloa cartel. He wouldn't do this through power or even muscle. He did it by playing dirty. Clavel seduced Palma's wife, Guadalupe Lea Serrano, convincing her to steal $7 million from her husband's accounts.
7 mil?
That alone was
that's
pretty
no
bold. But then Clavel wasn't content with just money. He would take it to a level so twisted that even seasoned cartel members were disgusted. After stealing the cash, Clavel murdered Guadalupe, strangling her in a hotel room in San Francisco. Now, later myths would say that she was beheaded and her body actually dumped at a campground. Clavel then kidnapped Palma's 2 young children, Jesus and Nathalie, and takes them to Venezuela and throws them off a bridge, their bodies landing in a shanty down below. It's a crime so vicious it would spread fear amongst cartel circles down below. Venezuela and throws them off a bridge, their bodies landing in a shanty down below. It's a crime so vicious it would spread fear amongst cartel circles. Clavel wasn't acting like a disciplined trafficker, but more like a reckless madman, desperate to prove himself. Now, what Clavel failed to realize was that in this cartel world, actions like this don't go unpunished. Palma, devastated and enraged, goes on this relentless rampage for revenge with the aid of his allies in the Sinaloa cartel. He initially believed that his old boss, Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo, was behind the killings. This would lead to a brutal war between Palma and Gallardo's factions, with numerous executions on both sides. However, when Palma learned the truth that Clavel had acted out of sheer greed, well, he made it his mission to hunt them down. Clavel's downfall came swiftly. Palma's men tracked him to Venezuela, where they systematically eliminated anybody associated with him. Friends, family, even his landlord. But the real payback would come when Clavel was cleverly captured and thrown into a Caracas prison. Under Palma's orders, Clavel was brutally raped, stabbed, and ultimately castrated. Palma's orders.
Really, what?
Clavel was brutally raped.
They took his butt? They took his butt?
stabbed, and ultimately castrated before being left to die in deep agony. His body was discarded like trash, a message to anyone who thought they could cross the wrong cartel and survive. Clavel thought he was making a power move. In reality, he was just a pawn, in a world where real gangsters and cartel bosses don't give a shit. His story isn't one of dominance and strategy. It's of arrogance, betrayal, and ultimately a short-lived existence in a game he was never truly built to survive. Stealing from a cartel's pretty stupid, and then lying to them about it is simply worse. But that's the case of Martín Alejandro Cota Monroy, while dealing with one of Mexico's most dangerous cartels in a bid to be smart. But little did he know that this move would later alter the course of his life for the worse. It all started with a bad decision. Cota Monroy wasn't some high-level cartel boss. He was like a small-time player in a vast world of drug trafficking. And he would make a deadly mistake here. He stole from the wrong set of people. Reports said that he took a massive drug shipment, about 400 pounds of marijuana and some meth, from a cartel linked to the trafficking group known as PEI Estatales, which had ties to the powerful Sinaloa cartel. But here's where it gets interesting, because instead of taking responsibility for the theft, he lied to his bosses and claimed that the Border Patrol had seized the drugs. If there's one thing you should never do, it's lie to a cartel. You're gonna die either way, just make it less brutal. These organizations run on fear, loyalty, and some crazy enforcement. Cota Monroy thought he could outsmart them all. Maybe he believed since he was in the US he was kinda safe, but he was wrong. Realizing the cartel would eventually learn the truth, Cota Monroy fled to Chandler, Arizona, hoping that being on U.S. soil would shield him from some form of retaliation. Now, for a while, it seemed like he'd gotten away with it. He was laying low, trying to blend in, pretending that this nightmare he'd created for himself wouldn't catch up. But the cartel isn't known for forgiving or forgetting, and not long after his escape, sicarios would track him down. Now, these guys had a mission to send a message. Now, they wouldn't want him just dead. They had to make an example out of him. So on October 10th, 2010, Cota Monroy was at this apartment complex in Chandler, Arizona, when these sicarios moved in. Disguised as friends, people he knew and possibly even trusted, this guy had no idea it was going to be his last night alive. What happens next is something out of your best cartel execution video. They behead him. A sight so bad that even cops used to seeing the worst of humanity were just left in shock. You see, beheadings aren't just about revenge. These guys are making a statement. Cartels kill, yeah, but they send messages through them. A gunshot would have been way too quiet. A stabbing, too subtle. But a beheading, now people are paying attention. The killing immediately sent shockwaves throughout law enforcement. Police and federales scrambled to understand what the hell happened. Was cartel violence creeping across the border? Was this the start of a new wave of executions on U.S. soil? As investigations unfolded, it became clear that this wasn't just a random killing. It was a full-fledged cartel hit. Authorities arrested several suspects, all of them linked to drug trafficking. One of them, Cristantos Moroyoki Yosupicio, was later sentenced to 14 years in prison for his role in this brutal murder. But despite the arrest, the killings left cops rattled. If cartels could track, capture, and decapitate anybody they want in the U.S., well, what the hell does that mean for the future? Are there going to be more cartel-style executions? Well, the feds and other agencies took notice, and now they're increasing their focus on cartel activity in the southwestern U.S. Cota Monroy's murder became a stark reminder of just how far-reaching the cartel's power and brutality could be. He had thought he was safe. He thought he could cheat the cartel and disappear into the U.S. But the cartels don't let that crap slide. They always collect their debts. Oh man, in August 2023, authorities made a chilling discovery. 13 bodies stuffed in freezers aboard trucks in a notoriously violent Mexican state. Alongside them's a message claiming responsibility from 4 letters, the CJNG. Now that's a sight that could traumatize a man for life. So what exactly led to this gruesome scene? Well, for context, Poza Rica is a city known for its oil wealth, and now it's become one of the most dangerous battlegrounds. The streets are soaked in blood, with gangs fighting to keep control. as the CJNG or Jalisco New Generation Cartel pushes forward with their signature brutality. This ain't just a turf war, people. We have a clash between an internationally feared cartel and local criminal networks who just refuse to go down without a fight. But as the bodies are piling up, it's clear that the CJNG has the upper hand, leaving Poza Rica in a state of terror. Nemesio Elemencho Oseguera, leader of the CJNG, has a reputation for taking over territories with sheer force. He doesn't like to negotiate, he just eliminates. Poza Rica, located in Veracruz, was never going to be an exception. But unlike other regions where CJNG has swiftly taken control, this city kind of put up a fight. You see, here you have local gangs with many roots to the once mighty Los Zetas, and they'd been operating here for years. These guys know the streets, had their own networks, and had become deeply embedded in the city structure. They weren't willing to hand it over without a war. And at the center of this battle would be a faction called Los Tercios, made up of former Zetas, defectors from CJNG, and remnants from Grupo Sombra. Now, they weren't the biggest force in Mexico, but they knew Poza Rica inside and out, using it to their advantage. They'd had support from corrupt officers, local politicians, and other criminal cells. But even with all their knowledge and connections, now they're up against a machine far bigger than themselves. Enter the CJNG, a highly organized and well-funded cartel. And they're not about to let this resistance slow them down. They moved into Poza Rica with their usual tactics: public executions, ambushes, and targeted police assassinations. They quickly turned the city into a war zone, mutilated bodies scattered everywhere as warnings to those who dare to oppose them. Police are caught in the middle of this, some trying to keep order while others just quietly stay to the side, maybe join the cartels, either out of fear or greed. Those who refuse to cooperate with the CJNG will often end up in another gruesome statistic. Now, one of the key players in this battle would be El Coco, a feared CJNG enforcer. Rumors said that he had defected to Los Tercios, but that turned out to be false. El Coco had deep roots in the criminal world, once operating under a Zetas commander, Ciro El Puccini Gonzalez Perez. And after El Puccini was taken out, El Coco aligned himself with the CJNG, making him one of their most trusted men in Poza Rica. His role in this conflict was brutal, coordinating assassinations, leading attacks, and making sure the CJNG's grip on the city tightened with each passing day. Los Tercios and other local gangs weren't going to go down without a fight, though. They go ahead and launch attacks on CJNG convoys, carry out their own ambushes, and even went after police officers who they believed was working with their enemies. Now, the violence escalates to a point where Poza Rica's police force could barely function. Cops resigned en masse, either too afraid to continue or because they'd been bought off. Entire neighborhoods became no-go zones, with poor civilians caught in the middle of a war they had no part in. The brutality on both sides was relentless. Mass executions were like common. In one particularly gruesome event, several bodies are left in a pile with a CJNG banner, a clear message that resistance was futile. Los Tercios struck back by targeting a police convoy they believed was assisting the CJNG, killing many cops in a coordinated ambush. The response, though, was immediate. El Coco and his men launch a series of retaliatory strikes, executing anyone suspected of siding with Los Tercios. But no matter how much the local gangs fought, CJNG is just too strong. This cartel has more guys, more money, and more firepower. The local resistance was determined, but they were being worn down. The real breaking point would come in August 2023. After years of bloodshed, the violence reaches a new peak when CJNG launches a devastating series of attacks that wipe out several key members of Los Tercios. They go after the cops, business owners suspected of financing the rivals, and even local politicians. Poza Rica becomes a city under siege, with the government struggling to contain the chaos. So the Mexican government couldn't ignore this any longer. In response to the escalating violence, they launch a massive crackdown in August 2023, leading to the arrest of several cartel members from both sides. Dozens of ops were taken down, including some high-ranking figures within Los Tercios. But while the arrests made headlines, it wouldn't really change the reality on the ground. You see, the damage was done. The CJ&G had effectively asserted their dominance, proving that no matter how much the resistance had, they'd always be one step ahead. Now, for the poor people of Poza Rica, there's no victory anywhere, just survival. Businesses shut down, families fled, and those who remained, well, live in constant fear. The cartel had left a permanent scar on this city, and even with some guys behind bars, the CJ&G's power remains unchallenged. These guys had made their point. This was their territory now. But even now, the fight isn't completely over. There are still remnants of Los Tercios, whispers of the resistance. But the actual reality is pretty clear. CJ&G had won that battle, and Poza Rica will never be the same again.
The FBI is on the case of a missing Texas man they say bragged about stealing thousands of dollars from a Mexican cartel and then disappeared just 2 hours later.
It all started with a boast. A reckless claim made over the phone that would cost Eric Tadeo Ramirez everything. Let's go to March 24th, 2023, Laredo, Texas. Ramirez is talking with this woman on the phone, a convo that seemed casual but soon would turn dangerous. He makes a bold declaration.
Motherfuckers always stunning for the girls, bro. That's what happens, bro.
Stolen $50,000 from Cartel del Noreste, or CDN, which happened to be one of the most violent remnants of the once dominant Los Zetas cartel. But that wasn't the worst part. He laughed it off, saying that now he's in the US and had nothing to worry about.
Idiot.
That was his first mistake. For some reason, Ramirez felt
Do anything just to get some play, bro. What are you bragging about that for, bro?
safe in Laredo, a border city, but it's still the US. He might have assumed that the CDN's reach wouldn't have extended beyond Nuevo Laredo, a stronghold just across the Rio Grande in Mexico. And maybe he believed that American law enforcement would protect him if anything went wrong. But for some reason, he forgot cartels don't play by the same rules as everyone else. A bunch of masked guys with their guns arrived at his residence in a blue pickup truck. They wouldn't knock. They forced their way in, grabbed him, and dragged him out of his home. His screams were futile, and no one could stop what was happening. This guy was shoved into a truck and taken straight to the Juarez-Lincoln International Bridge, the gateway between Laredo, Texas and Nuevo Laredo, Mexico. And what happened next is caught on surveillance cameras. And guys, it's nothing short of horrifying. The cartel's truck reaches the bridge. Ramirez makes a last-ditch effort to escape. The footage shows this bloodied man, Ramirez, managing to push the door open while the truck was still moving. He tumbles out, hits the pavement pretty hard. And for a brief moment, he must have felt like he had a chance. But his captors weren't about to let him go. The video captures the chilling moment when one of the kidnappers jumps out, rushes toward him, and drags him back into the truck. The door slams shut, and just like that, Ramirez disappears into Mexico. That's the last time he was seen alive. Once in Nuevo Laredo, Ramirez is now in cartel territory. This guy ain't nothing more than a dead man walking. No one steals from Cartel del Noreste and gets away with it. Especially not somebody like him, some small-time player who thought he could cheat one of the most ruthless organizations in Mexico, please. Details of what happened to him remain unclear, but given the cartel's history, it's not hard to imagine his fate. CDN is infamous for its brutal executions, beheadings, dismemberments, and other unspeakable acts meant to send any kind of message they want. You see, when these people kill, it's a message for you, not to f*** with them. Back in the US, Ramirez's girlfriend and sister knew something was terribly wrong. So they reported the kidnapping to authorities, and soon the FBI got involved. With cartel violence seeping into American cities, we didn't have a random abduction here. We had a major security concern. Investigators worked quickly, and it wouldn't take long before they arrested a suspect. Jonathan Gabriales, a man with known ties to the Cartel del Noreste. Under questioning, Gabriales admitted to his role in the abduction. He confirmed that Ramirez had stolen from the cartel, and that this was the consequence. But that arrest didn't change the hope of finding Ramirez alive. This wasn't the first time a cartel had reached into the US to exact revenge, and it definitely won't be the last. Cartels have operated on both sides of the border for decades. using American cities as hubs for drug distribution and money laundering. But cases like Ramirez's really highlight something even more terrifying. Yeah, cartels aren't just smuggling drugs around, they're bringing the violence with them. And for decades, people have believed that being in the U.S. kind of provided some level of protection from cartel retribution. Well, Ramirez's case shattered that illusion if you had it. His fate proved that if a cartel wants to get you, ain't no border, no law enforcement agency, and no amount of cartel wants to get you. Ain't no border, no law enforcement agency, and no amount of hiding gonna stop him. But what makes his case so tragic is how easily it could have all been avoided. Again, this guy wasn't some high-level cartel figure or a major player in the drug trade. He was a guy who got greedy and made the fatal mistake of thinking he can outsmart one of the deadliest organizations in the world. But you gotta give it to him, he had the balls to brag about it like he was something, but that was the moment his fate was sealed. The CDN, like many others, thrive on fear and control. The moment you take from them, you become an example. You see, because what they do to you, they want to make sure that everybody understands it can happen to them, or worse. And that's why Ramirez's story spread so quickly. Despite the FBI's involvement and the arrest of Cabriales, many questions remain unanswered. Was Ramirez tortured before he was killed? Was his body ever recovered? Did others play a role in his abduction? Most likely, we'll never get these answers. But when someone gets into the cartel's clutches, the outcome is always almost the same. They vanish. You might find their bodies dumped in mass graves or dissolved in acid, so maybe just the bones, or just left hanging from bridges, as a warning to others. Eric Tadeo Ramirez thought he could cheat the cartel and walk away. For some reason, he thought the U.S. was going to protect him. He thought he could brag about stealing from one of the most violent criminal groups in Mexico, without consequences. Well, he soon learned that when you mess with the wrong cartel, there's no escape. Not even a border is going to save you. Back in the day, in the world of cyber warfare, Anonymous was a force to be reckoned with. A shadowy, decentralized group of hackers that took on governments, corporations, and anybody they deemed corrupt. They thrived on chaos, using digital warfare to expose secrets, disrupt systems, and make powerful enemies sweat. But in 2011, they made a mistake that they even had to back away from. They threatened Los Zetas, one of the most violent drug cartels at the time. And if there's one thing you don't do, it's pick a fight with a cartel that don't play by the rules. For context, Anonymous wasn't a traditional organization here.
Like Anonymous, bro, you play online, they play in real life, bro. They gonna pack your ass, dude. Dumb, like, bro.
They had no central leadership, no HQ, and no official members. Just a loose collective of skilled hackers who operated under a common ideology: expose corruption, defend internet freedom. One day, they'd be attacking a multinational corporation. The next, they're leaking classified government documents. It was awesome. They had no physical presence, only a digital footprint. And that's what made them so powerful. Los Zetas, on the other hand, were the complete opposite. They weren't shadowy, hiding behind a computer screen. They were mercenaries turned drug lords, a cartel built on discipline, military tactics, and sheer brutality. Now, they formed back in the 90s by former Mexican Special Forces soldiers. They took the ruthlessness of the drug trade to another level, with beheadings, mass executions, public assassinations, you name it. Let's say if the Sinaloa cartel is known for making deals, Los Zetas were known for making examples. The conflict between these two worlds started with #OpCartel, an anonymous-led operation that declared war on Los Zetas. Now, the reason? A fellow anonymous member had reportedly been kidnapped by the cartel in Veracruz during a protest. Anonymous issued an ultimatum.
Release our guy or we'll expose every corrupt official, police officer, and businessman working with Los Zetas.
Now, to Anonymous, this was just another operation. They leaked classified files before, taken down government websites, and even embarrassed corporations. This was business as usual for them. Except this ain't the FBI or some
Bet you they ain't get their mans back. Bet you they ain't.
greedy corporation. This is Los Zetas, and they don't play by the same rules. Now, at first, it seemed like Anonymous had the upper hand. The cartel relied on secrecy, and a massive data dump exposing their network could cripple their operations. But what Anonymous didn't realize was that Los Zetas had something far deadlier than data breaches: real-world terror. The cartel didn't issue legal threats or counter hacks. They didn't file lawsuits. They hunted people down. And within days, rumors spread that Los Zetas now had their own cyber experts to track down anonymous members. Unlike corporations who could only fire their employees or tighten security, the cartel had a different solution: kill anyone they identified. Now, the cartel had made examples out of journalists and bloggers who spoke out against them. Bodies are found hanging from bridges with warnings carved into their flesh. And a few months before #OpCartel, a woman known for reporting on cartel activity through social media was beheaded. Her lifeless body was dumped with a note that read,
"This will happen to anyone who messes with us."
You see, Anonymous wasn't facing a cyber war. They're facing the war of blood. As the operation's launch date approached in early November 2011, something unexpected happened. #OpCartel was suddenly canceled. Well, for a group that had taken down world governments, corporations, and law enforcement agencies back...
How many of them you think it took dying to stop that?
...down seemed out of character. So, what happened? Well, it turns out some members of Anonymous claimed it was out of concern for innocent people who might be caught in the fallout. Smart move. But others suggested that it was something far more chilling, that the cartel had already tracked down key members and made direct threats. Think about it. Anonymous had always been untouchable because they operated online. The Los Zetas didn't need to hack anybody. They just needed names, addresses, and a few bullets. Reports surfaced that Anonymous members in Mexico had gone silent. Some deleted their accounts, others stopped communicating altogether. One anonymous hacker would even release a video, his voice shaking, urging the group to abandon the operation. So in the end, Anonymous never released any confirmed list of cartel-affiliated officials. Some reports claim that the kidnapped hacker had already been freed before the operation was abandoned. But details remain unclear. What's certain, though, is that Anonymous underestimated the real-world consequences of their threats. Governments and corporations might retaliate with their lawsuits and counter-hacks, but Los Zetas? Come on. That was a mistake. They have execution squads. And after this near-deadly mistake, Anonymous returned to its usual activism, taking on corrupt governments. Maybe not Mexico's. Corporations. And politicians. But you know what they never did again? Directly challenge a major cartel. And as for Los Zetas, well, their power declined over the years due to government crackdowns and infighting. And by the late 2010s, they'd fractured into smaller factions, no longer the dominant force they once were. But their legacy of terror remained. The Anonymous v. Los Zetas incident stands as a chilling reminder. Hackers may be powerful in the digital world. They can leak your files, shut down websites, and expose all your secrets. But when the enemy doesn't rely on the internet, and when they don't care about exposure, and when their only purpose is pure, unrelenting violence, well, that's when even the world's most notorious hackers realize that they've messed with the wrong people, maybe. Anonymous learned that one the hard way. Could have been worse. And in this game of chicken, Anonymous backed off.
That's the end of the video, you feel me? If you watched the video with me, thank you a lot, appreciate you. If you're new, subscribe, like, comment what you want me to watch next. Shit. Yeah. I ain't gonna lie, bro. You got all that power on the internet in real life. After all that, though. Peace.